In 2004, I had a coworker, an office mate, who loved the Mike Judge comedy Office Space. I love that movie too. My coworker's favorite character was the woman who liked to say, "Uh-oh, sounds like someone's got a case of the Mondays." It's such a perfect line for this character because we all know that coworker with Kathy comics pinned to her cubicle wall whose deepest opinions are about chocolate and who can't be talked to till she's had her coffee. It's a rock solid one-liner, and my coworker loved to quote it with the actress's full inflection and all. But quoting a movie is one thing. Quoting a satire is another, because the more my coworker liked to say someone's got a case of the Mondays, the more she became that person who likes to say someone's got a case of the Mondays. My coworker loved lampooning that archetype so much that she became that archetype. Mike Judge was fed up with corporate disingenuousness, and he made a movie that continually mocks this. But the movie is essentially a heist film. Satire is just the sweet peanut butter of comedy hiding the bitter pill of moral righteousness. But it is both hilarious and sanctimonious. Satire, basically, in my mind, is a tone of voice, not a genre. Another late 1990s satire is Michael Haneke's Funny Games. According to the creator, it's not a horror film, but a send-up of violent horror films. Quote, "I don't like violence," Haneke says, "and I don't like horror movies. I would never do a thriller or horror film for the sake of doing it, and I would say that Funny Games is a self-reflexive anti-horror film. It is a criticism of violence because that really makes me angry." Looks like someone forgot to put the pill in the peanut butter, Michael, because the thing is, Funny Games is 100% a horror film and a thriller and quite violent. He lied to us and made both horror and thriller. And while Haneke's criticism of violence is loud and clear in this film, so is his ability to scare the shit out of us, to make us sad, to turn us inward, to reflect on grief, terror, the falling down of logic, and all of the things a horror film wants us to reflect on. Funny Games, in its attempt to criticize horrors and thrillers, essentially became the very thing it despised. Haneke had to have been sorely disappointed to realize that Funny Games has been universally cataloged as a horror thriller. I imagine him shuffling sad-faced around his office, wondering why it had to happen this way. Uh-oh, looks like someone's got a case of the Mondays. Hi, Cecil.
Hi, Jeffrey.
What is your favorite comic strip and or
My
comic strip
favorite.
character?
I mean, Family Circus is
Oh,
always a
sure.
good one.
You strike me as a family circus guy.
Absolutely. No, I gotta say, I mean, Garfield Without Garfield was I think like the last comic strip that I like read that truly enjoyed.
Yeah, you talk about an anti-comic strip in
Yeah,
Garfield minus Garfield. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, I love that strip. That's
Where
so good.
it's just, John just looking off into the distance,
Uh-huh.
looking off into the distance, looking off into the distance and going, "What?"
Yes. I haven't thought about Garfield minus Garfield in a while. If y'all are unfamiliar, please search for that comic strip. It's truly wonderful. I definitely was a Garfield fan as a small child. I remember my
Yes.
mom and I used to read the Garfield strips, and they were really funny. Of course, like I grew into Far Side and Calvin and
I was gonna,
Hobbes.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Balloon
Yep.
County was one I absolutely
Bloom
adored
County was
in the
good.
80s.
Yeah.
I One that I wasn't like a huge I kind of liked it was Peanuts, but I don't think I gained a real love of Charles Schultz and Peanuts until I was in college. And I can't remember if I've told this story on this podcast before, but I had a professor, a theater professor, Michael Greenwald, who was talking about Chekhov. And we all did not understand why Chekhov was funny. And he said, Chekhov is funny in the way that Peanuts is funny. Like, think about like the existential tragedy of everyone's lives, particularly like Charlie Brown. Think about like the humor in that is about constantly failing at something and other people thwarting you. And that's hilarious in an understated way. And from that point on, I really enjoyed both Chekhov and Peanuts quite a bit.
Love that.
Yeah,
That's
it's
100% agree.
yeah. So yeah, I'll go with Peanuts. I really like it. I bought several
Nice.
years ago, I bought the one of the Peanuts compilations that starts with strip one, and it
Oh,
goes for like
wow.
the first like year of Peanuts, and it's
Huh.
all of his early strips, and it's essentially the very first comic strip is these two kids sitting on on a curb, kind of like your Garfield minus Garfield, like not saying anything. And then one of them says, "There goes that Charlie Brown." And there's a pause in the next panel, and the final panel is the other kid going, "God, I hate him." That's the entire joke.
Damn.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's
It's
pretty
like,
good.
yeah, that's great.
Speaking of meanness, we watched this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Funny Games.
So funny.
Hilarious. This movie is absolutely brutal if you have any empathy in your body for other people, fiction or not. It is relentless. And like we said
Yep.
in the intro, Michael Haneke does not like violence for the sake of violence. He was lashing back against the 80s, 90s slasher horror movies and essentially doing what he does best, which is making the audience complicit in his
Yeah.
storytelling.
Yeah.
What is your take on, you've seen this movie before, Cecil? What is your relationship to this movie or your feelings about this film? I'm so curious.
I love this movie. I think this is maybe like the third or fourth time I've seen this. And the thing about this movie that I find really interesting is its complete lack of sentimentality. And I think that's where I'm like on board with Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Haneke. I'm like, there is no soundtrack to this movie. There are incidental songs that play over the beginning, and then the sort of like noise rock sound of this film by like sort of an avant-garde musician. But any other music comes from the radio, or there's no clues on how to feel about this movie except what the director has given you, and it has nothing to do with sentimentality, and it has everything to do with the aftermath of violence, I would say, or the implication of violence.
Yeah.
And I find that so much scarier. That haunts me so much longer. Like it's not, you're not going to watch, I don't know, let's say a dog getting beaten to death. You're going to watch the implications and the degradation that happens after a dog gets beaten to death.
Yeah. I couldn't help but to we watch all these older movies with 2020 eyes, 20th century, 2020s eyes. And one of the things that kept coming back to me was like being extremely online. I'm no longer extremely online like I was in like 2013 or something.
Sure. Yeah.
But one of the things about, especially on Twitter, but I think this exists on all platforms, is kind of the flurry of people, the reply guys, right? Like the flurry of people that run to tell you the most awful things. And
Okay.
even if they're not running to yell abuse at you, they're running to say stuff that just sounds crazy, that just you can't really like make any sense of. There was somebody on our random horror Twitter feed a couple weeks back that one of our fans was replying to somebody I don't know who has some other like horror movie blog or something, and they said, "Hey, you mentioned this movie. They covered this on Random Horror 9. It's a cool podcast. You should check it out." And the person followed us and then replied to that fan saying, "I'll listen to their podcast when they follow me back." And I'm like, that's insano making. Like, I absolutely like, I refuse to follow you back, sir. And I bring all of this up to say that one of the things that I have with being on, especially on Twitter, is looking into the eyes of a cow. You just see absolutely nothing. It is a dead eyes, a doll's eyes,
Yeah.
like from
Yeah.
Jaws. And that's what this movie is. It is dead eyes.
Yeah.
It's a doll's eyes. It is inscrutable. Paul, especially in this
Yeah.
movie,
Yeah.
is the true level of nihilism, truly
Truly
nihilistic.
nihilistic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sociopath, psychopath.
Yeah. And there's something about this, well, not something, there's a lot about this movie that makes it feel not like it's not even really happening because it's so aware of itself as a fiction.
Sure. Yeah.
And which makes it almost scarier that it doesn't have a level of reality, because you realize there are just forces in the universe that will not only kill you, but make you feel the worst pain of all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is maybe the fear of pain.
This movie, upon watching this again, I was kind of taken back to our conversation when Joseph Fink was on, and we watched Gator in a swimming pool.
Oh, the pool. Yeah, yeah.
The pool, whatever that was called, the pool, just the pool. But how, incensed. I think all three of us were at varying degrees of just like, oh my God, you literally have duct tape. You could have made a rope
Yep.
ladder and what are you in this? None of that.
No.
You get none of that. This movie is so flawlessly leads you along this path of, okay, identify with this lovely family that seems very bourgeoisie, that's very, competent leaders of their pillars of society, friends, family, all of that, everything a film would put in a protagonist. And now you're going to be implicit because you are in this film, is how I like to view it.
Yeah.
You are implicit in their demise.
Yeah. I think that's basically it. I think that's almost entirely what the film is about and what happens in the film in the broadest sense possible. I will say that this is one of these weird movies for me where I really adore what this movie is doing, especially as a Brecht fan.
Sure.
I really enjoy the lack of a soundtrack. I really enjoy the straightforwardness of the storytelling. I really like Hanukkah, and Amor is one of my favorite movies, and it's very similar in that makes you complicit and it
Mhm.
makes you aware of just the most sorrowful shit possible.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
Amor is somehow to me was really cathartic. I saw it in my mid 30s and was kind of thinking, or late 30s, and it really put me in this place of this is what older age might look like. This is what it
Yeah,
feels like to
yeah.
not just lose somebody close to you, but have them still present, next to you. And it was yeah, deeply personal and beautiful and hard to watch. This movie, I adored that it's doing a similar thing with of violent filmmaking, but it pissed me off ex post facto reading about why he made this movie.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
it reminds me of if you watch cooking competition shows like Chopped. So in Chopped, they get a basket full of 4 ingredients, and now you have to make an appetizer. Has to incorporate all 4 of these random ingredients. And what will end up happening is somebody will get like one of the ingredients will be like mango, and somebody will be like, "Oh, I hate mango. I really don't like mango." And they may be the most talented chef in the world, but what comes across is maybe a competently put together dish that just either overuses or underuses the mango. And the usually what happens in these cooking competition shows is when a person says I don't like an ingredient, they're going to get cut. Because the moment you don't like the ingredient is the moment the whole thing falls apart. It may be competently made, but the composition of it isn't coming
But you
together. And
gotta love it. You
you
gotta
have to
love
love
it.
it. And I can feel his disdain for what he was making
Yeah.
here. And that's a really frustrating thing to watch. But also, as an artist, I think it's really fascinating to see what happens when Michael Haneke, going into it with this approach, makes this fucking movie.
I also think that this is very pointed towards American culture, even though this
Mm.
is a German film. And I mean, literally, they do an English version remake of this because this movie was so successful, with English speaking actors, and
Mhm.
it's seamlessly transferred to wherever in the USA. But there is something about it, from the car racing on TV
Uh-huh.
to just I don't know, is this is it about or maybe it's about European bourgeoisie? I don't know, but it does feel pointedly put up or shut up to sort of upper middle class America in a lot of ways.
It does, or wealthy America. Like there's almost like a flaunting of wealth, almost
Yeah.
like they're not in public flaunting their wealth. They're just going
No.
to their Austrian chalet or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's still it is still rich people with sweaters tied around their necks, taking
Yes.
their sailboats out on the lake to go into each property and be like, we'll have to have you over for dinner. Yes, we absolutely shall have
They're
you
like,
over
oh,
for dinner.
like silly me. I tried to defrost this entire 25-pound steak all at once. Ugh, I'm such a fool. You must come over and eat it all for me.
Listening to fucking opera on their drive-in, all
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
So another movie that I thought of besides Office Space, thinking about this film, was Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is a movie slash play about games. It is also a
Yeah.
psychological horror
Yeah.
about playing games. All throughout Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, every scene, somebody is starting another game. And this movie is that too. It begins with them. This is Georg. Well, I'm just gonna call him George. George, Anna, and then their son Georgie, probably 10 or so, and
Yeah.
their dog Rolfie, and they're driving in
Oh,
their
Rolfie.
Range Rover, with their sailboat in tow along
That is a
these.
legit boat. That
That
boat
is
is
a
long.
real boat.
Like that's a real boat for people who know how to boat.
Mm-hmm. It's
Like
nice.
this is not a redneck boat. This
No.
is like legit. And I
Yes.
think that's important. These distinctions are important in that it's not, even more than another movie that came to mind was Us. The
Mm-hmm.
idea of the weird
100%.
in between space of the vacation home, the like, okay, family, let's get in the car and go out to a remote place and everything's going to be grand because our money protects us.
You can definitely see the imprint of you can definitely see the imprint of this opening scene on the movie Us, and especially even the conversations around music in the car, like
Yeah,
listening to
yeah, yeah,
music in the car is so big at the start of Us. And they're listening to opera, and the game is mom is choosing the CD to listen to the opera to listen to, and the game
yeah,
is dad has to guess which composer, which opera.
yeah.
And she puts on a new CD, and he's like, "Oh, is this a new CD?" She's like, "Of course it is." He's like,
I know. I
"Oh,
love how he tries to like dodge the question. He's like, "Oh, but she's like, yes, and it
mhm.
is what?"
I think it sounds like Handel."
Yeah.
She's like,
Okay.
"Yeah, but which
Clearly.
one?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then he finally gives up, and I forget which opera it is, and she's like, 3-2, my favor. And then this is a shot like straight down the barrel of the car with them
Yeah.
facing the
Yeah.
camera from the dashboard, and it is immediately big title Funny Games in red on the screen. Music is full on like noise core.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. 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 Pure. The sound of pure anarchy.
Yeah, absolutely. Total musical anarchy. And we see them
But
kind
it's
of carry on talking while this music is just thrashing about in our heads.
but it looks like she has put that on. Like there's so many things that he does in like using simultaneity, of like something will happen and a sound will happen, and those visuals and that sound do not necessarily go together all the time,
Yeah.
or someone will be talking off screen. This is my favorite. So you have like, or just like a disembodied pair of hands will just be like working
Mm-hmm.
on something, and you'll hear voices coming from off screen, but it adds this sense of your brain in this opening sequence. Your brain goes, new music is playing. A CD, which is something that plays music, has been put in. And yet you logically know that this noise, this anarchy is clearly not what they're listening to for just a
Yeah.
second. But your brain thinks, why did she put this on? Or,
Yeah.
and that is what this movie is all about.
Yeah.
In the let's go on a summertime road trip film, it would be like, okay, let's put on the song, and it's the Romeo and Michelle like woo kind of moment
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
soundtrack. We've got an upbeat cabin in the woods kind of soundtrack to get us to our location, and it is not that.
No.
I also love how detached it's just you're just watching. You don't even see the family for like all of this conversation over opera. It's hands just doing, putting things or flipping through the CDs or the above shot.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first time you see this family of three characters, it's so um unnatural, not unnatural, like it's like nobody, even though it's just like mom, son in the middle seat, dad, like very like two-dimensional, like, okay, this is the family, this is
Mm-hmm.
a family, this is your family, this is any family. I feel like it's just so symmetrical. It's unnatural because it's so symmetrical.
Absolutely. Well, they pull up to their kind of gated neighborhood, a neighborhood of gated giant houses, and they have their next door neighbors. This is Fred and I forget Fred's wife's name,
Like
but
Gerda, no, Gerda comes
yeah,
later, I think.
yeah. But there's the Fred family, and it's essentially the same thing. It's husband, wife, and like 10-year-old daughter,
Yeah.
and they see Fred and two other guys outside, like swinging golf clubs.
Yeah.
And
Just
Anna's
hanging
like,
out on the lawn, having a chat.
haven't, yeah. And Anna yells out the window. She's like, hey, no fair practicing golf before we play tomorrow. So again, with the games.
You got a case of the Mondays, do you?
Yeah. And she rolls up her window. She's like, are they acting weird? That was weird. They seem
Yeah,
to be
like they were
acting
very
weird.
terse. And if a German calls you terse, then something is fucking wrong.
So yeah. Well, remember they are Austrian.
Oh, Austrian, excuse me. Pardon.
Yes.
Sorry.
I was trying to think. I forgot to look this up. Have we done a German film? Because we did Goodnight Mommy, which is also Austrian.
Oh no.
I know. Is Austria winning in the game of
Oh
countries featured on
my.
this show?
Wow. Okay. Well, looks like we'll have to. Looks like what our next location for the dice roll
That's
should be.
right. Georgie, kiddo Georgie notices that their daughter Sissy isn't with them either.
Yes.
And he's like, I
And
hope
he's like,
Sissy's
"Oh,
here. Oh, I want to see Sissy.
it's
I
gonna be
want a
so
friend.
boring without someone my own age."
Yeah. And Dad George is like, it's nothing. It's fine. Which is very
Yeah,
typical
we'll keep you
gendered
busy.
thing. Wife
Yeah.
notices something seems weird. Husband is always like, it's fine. Stop worrying about it.
Yeah.
So then at the house, Fred comes over and introduces Paul. And he says,
We introduces Paul to whom? Because this is part of the game.
That's right.
The first game is knowing that you're part of a game.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is the first game. And that is the game that these three characters lose.
Yeah.
Because they don't realize they're in a game until they are so beaten down that there's no way. It's like there's no way they can come back. But I think who does Paul meet first?
He meets George and Georgie.
That's it.
And Rolfie, because Rolfie is losing his fucking dog mind, barking
Rolfie's
at
just
Paul.
running around. I actually love this. The introduction of the house almost through the eyes of Rolfie. Like Rolfie's just like sniffing the couch.
Mm-hmm.
Rolfie does a little turn. He goes upstairs, and young Georgie Jr. is like, Rolfie, get off of my suitcase. Rolfie goes out. Rolfie visits mom in the kitchen, and then Rolfie goes outside. But like, what a brilliant and like organic way to be like, this is the game board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. It's a great way of looking at that. Rolfie I love because Rolfie, this classic notion that animals know when a storm's brewing. Yeah. Animals know when shit is up.
They know friend from foe.
Yeah, cats who know you have cancer or whatever. There's this. Rolfie knows Paul is fucking bad news.
Evil.
Yeah,
evil
smelling dog.
Yeah.
And so they come back inside after meeting this Paul guy, and even Georgie is like, why was that Paul guy so weird?
Yeah.
And also, where's Sissy? And his dad, George, is like, just stop moping and help me put up the sailboat.
Yeah.
Okay. Anna in the kitchen.
This is, oh God, out of the many scenes of this film, I think this introduction scene is my fucking favorite, to be honest. Like, I know all the heavy acting is going to come later, but like the ease of this is so beautiful. Mm-hmm. The light is so beautiful. The fact that they're like, it's just like the writing is so gorgeous. Like there's seamless. It is fucking seamless. Like I can't find any, there's no way going back to the pool. There's no way that you'd be like, that was a bad move. That was a mistake. Oh no. Oh, she's got a character flaw that will be her undoing later. No, this is she's just behaving. She's talking to a friend. She's, they've gotten to their beach house. She's connecting with her friend. She's, like, as I said before, she's got a big fucking knife, and she's, expertly kind of taken this meat down, like butchering this meat and, just doing next level housewife shit.
Yeah.
But it's very, that whatever is going to occur to someone who is like an inscrutable character.
Mm-hmm.
Like mom is gonna be tough, right?
Yeah. She is very kind of doesn't suffer fools.
Yeah.
Sort of person, not in an aggressive way, but she's one of those. she's one of those adults that you can see when you have disappointed her on her face, which is
Oh yeah.
part of the game that we're about to meet Peter. Who knows
Yeah.
if these are these boys' real names? They call each other so many things throughout this
I know,
movie.
right? The Beavis and Butthead.
Beavis and Butthead and Tom and Jerry.
Yep.
Again, going back to your notion that even if this is Australian, I'm sorry, Austrian, this is inherently an American film. This is a movie about Americans.
About American culture.
American culture.
About Western
right.
culture, I guess.
Right. So, God, this Peter boy arrives. So Paul's our brunette but guy. He's kind of got like darker features, a more like heavy brow, more gaunt, skinny,
swimmer's build.
Yeah. And then Peter is blonde haired, round faced, a little bit doughier, like softer features, bigger bodied. And they both wear all white and wear white gloves.
Yes.
Not even like golfing gloves, like you would think, more like I'm handling church bells. I'm handling silverware.
Yeah. Like what they wear in like to keep fingerprints off things, let's say.
Yes.
And it's not that they're wearing I love the there's something so aristocratic about white. There's something so upper class about white, because white means you can't get dirty or else it shows and you have to change your clothes. And so the fact that we have our killers cast in all white means that they're so good at their job. They get in, they get out, no blood, no mess. Like normally horror movies, like these things that they're about ready to unleash, like usually there's like a residue that's left behind. And actually, Peter has a little bit of residue on his hands that he tries to wash off at the end of the film, but just a little bit.
Yeah, because his hands have, his gloves have blood on them.
Yeah, actually he got some blood and some eggs on it, I think, probably. But it's also like the short boating shorts with the like topsiders with no, or the Converse with no socks, and the polo shirt. So I lived in Washington D.C. for quite a bit in my 20s, and I saw that was kind of my first encounter with how the truly wealthy live in our society, and the medium wealthy and everything in between, and this is so accurate. This like that ease of this, these two kids could be CEOs of their own startup company. Or probably the children of CEOs of companies. They have no worries. Of course, they blend in perfectly. They're white. White goes with everything, right?
Right. So Peter shows up and says, Ava, that's Fred's wife's name. He says, your neighbors, Ava, we're staying with them. Ava sent me to get eggs. And she's like, wait, how did you get in through? There's a gate. And he's like, oh, I came around through around the back. She's like, but you're not wet. That's water back there. He's like, there's a hole in the fence. Ava pointed it out to me, which is already like,
what?
Great. Here's your eggs.
Yeah,
why? I'm just gonna run to the store. You want to run to the store with me? Hop in, kids. Let's go. We're going to Price Chopper. Yeah.
But again, it's so subtle that like wouldn't raise any alarm bells, no red flags. Also, the fact that, but she catches, this is one that I love, where she's like, oh, I need 4 eggs, and she's like, for what?
Yeah.
Like, what are you making that needs 4 eggs? Because that is like 2 very large omelets. And it is, as she even says, it's like we establish a time. It's around 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the evening. Sort of twilight magic-y hours about ready to happen. But she's like, what the fuck do you need 4 eggs? What, are you baking a cake over there?
Yeah.
And he's like, and he doesn't have an answer.
He just shrugs. He's like a kid. Yeah. I don't know. Like, then he drops the eggs he's like, I don't even need a bag for these. I'll just carry them. You see him like a child trying to hold too many things. It's exactly what he's doing. He drops them on the floor.
Off camera.
He's like, I'm so sorry. And she's frustrated. And he's like, can I get more eggs? Because I saw that. Well, I saw you had 12. Is that not true?
Yeah.
And you said you don't really eat, that many eggs for breakfast. So,
and I'm so sorry. And he constantly, he's like, me and my Butterfingers. Look, don't talk to me before I have had my coffee. Like he keeps piling on that sort of look, I'm the worst. I know, but also, can I get those eggs?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what like really flips her switch. That is like it's the audacity that he's willing to ask for more, but the fact that it's that sort of like self-deprecating in just like, I'm a worm. I know I'm the worst. I'm the absolute worst. And she's like, yeah, I get it.
He
You're the fucking worst.
also, I
Get out of
think
my
the
kitchen.
tipping point for her is he knocks her
Yeah,
wireless
yeah, yeah, yeah.
landline phone into the full sink of water, which fries the phone.
Right. Yeah.
And it's very clear in watching it, it's absolutely on purpose. We can
Of
see it
course
as
it
on
is.
purpose. He's like, oops,
Yeah.
and she
Oh,
finally says,
me.
take the eggs and go. And he goes, you're not going to wrap them? Which is just, I mean, I cackle. I'm watching Succession right now. I'm behind. I've never
Yes.
watched the show. I
Yeah.
just started watching Succession. I'm like, you're a cast member of this other show of
Yeah.
psychopaths who say the worst things to people.
Well, because it's that level of somebody once said to me, like, beware when, or no, I heard this in a film once that was like, beware when luxuries become necessities. And it was kind of, somebody said that to like an up and coming actor or writer, or, you know, somebody who's like, star was on the rise. And it's like, when you get into your car, you need to be driven from place to place. That is a normal thing for your job. But
Yeah.
when you have these, start having like, no, I need my own car. I refuse to share a car. And it must be a Lexus or a fucking hybrid or whatever the
Yeah.
latest rich person car is. And it must be stocked with Sky vodka only, or whatever the fuck your luxury request is. And this idea of, really, if it was your neighbor, and you know, rich people are actually pretty casual about a lot of shit, but they also know when to pull out the no, I have purchased a thing where I am used to a level of luxury that should just be just a normalcy, such as
Yeah.
wrap my eggs to go for me, please.
Yeah.
And that is a luxury. And this is the world we're in. And I love that you brought up Succession, because so many times, like, the joy of that show is watching these, like, you know, adult children just not able to understand a world in which everything isn't a luxury,
Right.
in which it's just a car. We can't just have a car. It must be the best black car, and it must be on the fucking tarmac taking me to my Cessna.
Yeah. Yeah, I just got done with one of the season 1 episodes where Logan is mad that he has to fly to see the president, and the
I know,
president won't
right?
fly
Yeah.
to see him. It's the best. All right, so Peter leaves, but then he's not. We
Second
hear
round of eggs. Second
we
round of eggs is out the door.
out the door theoretically, but we hear Rolfie barking up a
I
storm.
know.
And then she rounds the corner by the back door, and there are two boys standing there inside her house. This is Paul and Peter.
Yeah.
And Paul's like, he's afraid of dogs. Peter's afraid of dogs. And the dog jumped up on him. And Anna's like, he just wants to play a game, literally says that phrase.
Yeah.
And then Paul sees George's nice golf clubs. He's like, oh, whoa, these are very nice. You already have an advantage over us in tomorrow's golf game. Mind if I try one? I'll shoot the balls towards the water, not the house. And she's like, if it makes you happy, is what she says.
Yeah, right. Which is like, so just like, get like, clearly she is not happy.
Right.
And she wants him to get the fuck out. But you can't nudge a sociopath with subtleties.
No.
You know?
And clearly, as we'll learn, you can't nudge them with hard pushes either, with obvious statements, because that shit escalates real hard.
Yeah.
Well, so they go outside.
Unless you mean it.
Unless you mean it. Outside, Rolfie is barking again, and we hear a sudden just yelp from the dog, and then it goes
we're down with Dad and the kids and George, and it's like bark, bark, bark. Roar!
Done.
And you can see them both go, Dad's like, I'll go check it out. And you're like, oh fuck.
He also talking about the craft of this film and what it's doing and breaking convention the way it wants to go against convention. In fact, later in the movie, it's just nonstop talk about breaking film convention. Like, that's what these boys are talking about. And we see George knock over Chekhov's knife in the boat.
Yes.
We see it go down into a little crack.
Or
like,
anti Chekhov's knife.
Yeah,
I would say.
absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Like, breaking of convention. He is so clearly focused on this knife and how it gets knocked down into the little wedged in the corner. We think, well,
And you're like, yes, there's always a
that's
knife in the boat. There's
always the
always a knife
knife.
in the boat. But you know what? Still doesn't help
Yep. There's always money in the banana stand.
until you burn it down.
Yeah. Uh, Anna's wearing down on these boys real hard. She's
Yeah.
like, please leave. And Paul says, I don't know why you're so unfriendly. Give Tom the eggs. He calls him Tom, which is
Yeah.
really interesting. He keeps calling him Tom. We don't know his name is Peter yet, so it gets really confusing. But give Tom the eggs and we'll go.
Yeah. Because your dog knocked him out of his hand.
Yeah.
So it's practically your fault, ma'am.
Yeah. Cecil, I do a thing when I get uncomfortable watching a show. I do this during Succession too, just watching uncomfortable dialogue. But if I'm watching a show at home, I bring my feet up underneath me. Like I get on my haunches on the couch and I curl into balls and I roll around. Yeah, I get so bodily tense, and especially in conversations like this. This movie is so hard to watch. It is nearly unwatchable.
Theater of Menace is a really great sort of parallel. Like this is kind of the next direct link to like a Pinter play, in that it's not about except
Pinter rarely
does anything.
Does anything.
One, they actually do stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, this scene, like, and especially so now we've kind of got everybody in one place. You know, George and Georgie come in, and Anna says, I want them out. And he's like, what? I mean, you're clearly upset, honey. Surely we should talk. She's like, no, I want them out. That should be enough for you, my husband. I'm going in the other fucking room because I can't look at these yahoos anymore.
Yeah.
So, man, listen, I feel like, and again, it's like I put myself in the place, you know, like anyone with empathy watches a film and they put themselves in the protagonist's place and they go, oh, I would have done that. But no, like these are all the right moves. Like she's had enough. And she's like, bam, I'm out of here. And the husband, could he have listened to her and been like, you know, you get off of my property? But that would have escalated to the point of kind of a ridiculous level, just because, you know, people have weird days or bad days, or they don't like people. But you're like, okay, my wife is a bit, you know, we've had a long day. She's a bit tired. Maybe you should go. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, you're a psychopath, get the fuck off my property. Like there's no warning there. Mm-hmm. You know, like in something like The Strangers or Them or one of those, like there's always a moment where you're like, dude, you're being fucking hunted. Like if you don't know you're hunted by now, we know you're hunted and you're a dummy. There's no dummies in this film, which makes me want to curl into a ball. And you know, like for me, my thing is like, I have to like, you know, like watch. I have to like make myself watch things sometimes. Like for me, this is the equivalent of watching the first round of American Idol auditions, in which you're just like, oh my God. Like sometimes I'll even put a blanket over my face, because for me, it's not the sound. It's actually the watching the uncomfortableness in people's faces.
Yep.
That's what gets to me.
Yeah. Paul tells George, give us the eggs. That's all we're asking for. And he's like, you watch your tone with me. And Paul starts to speak again. He slaps Paul.
Yeah.
And then Paul basically takes the golf club and just full on par 5 drive into his knee.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Georgie comes after him. They fight off Georgie. Mom comes back downstairs because of the commotion. And now we know game on.
Game on.
Yeah, we know the shit's about to get in a place we didn't think it was going to be, which also to this film's credit, as far as breaking convention, I've sort of learned visually the pattern of a lot of horror movies, which is it's usually at about the 40% mark. Somewhere between 40 to 50% of the movie is when everything really clicks in. It's oftentimes like first death, even in a slasher film, sometimes first death isn't, there may be like a preamble where somebody dies or something, but like the first death when shit starts to go real haywire, where everybody starts dying, is usually almost near the halfway point. And this is at the quarter point of my notes. Like, we get
Yeah.
right into it. Like, I didn't look at the timestamp, but I can't imagine we're 20 minutes into this hour and 50-minute film.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, and the reason I think why a lot of other movies do that, one is to prolong the feature length. Sometimes shittier movies have less to say, so they're just padding. But also because you want to build a backstory for these people.
Yeah.
You want to make them relatable. He doesn't really do that with this film. I mean, they're relatable because they're protagonists. They're relatable because it's a family, you know, you want, and a dog, and everybody is sort of
Sure.
inherently, I want them to live. But like, we have no backstory on these people. I don't know what they
No.
do. I don't know what their marriage is like. I don't know what this little boy's dreams and interests are. You
Doesn't
know,
matter.
none of that shit. No, none of that shit matters.
I would say they're also the another added to this of like we put ourselves because it's aspirational, because they're rich. Who
Yeah.
doesn't want to have a nice beach house or lake
Yeah.
house with a giant boat and, you know, like wear nice clothes and eat delicious looking food? Who doesn't want that? Just because your neighbors happen to be sociopaths, or, you know, one day you might get murdered in your house and nobody gives a fuck, that, you know, like that's, like, it's just the price you pay.
Yeah. One thing that Paul starts talking about Peter, he's like, "Oh, you should have my friend Peter here look at your leg because you know,
Oh
he
my
studies
God.
medicine. He's getting his medical degree."
Is he?
You know, Jesus. Well, because later he talks about studying like being for an actuary or something, like he's just all, or wanting to go in the military or some shit. Like
The military, like the things for the next, I would say, so we've kind of say I've reached act one is kind of, you know, the introduction act is kind of done. Now it's the game. You know, the game is on. You know, the most dangerous game is on. And this is, again, back to us, this idea of like, let's meet in the family living room. Time has passed. He's like, oh, it's dark. We turn on a light. It's very organic. Again, organic lighting, organic soundscape. There's no swelling of music. There's no bum, 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 bum to get you going. It's on the surface, everything looks completely normal.
Yeah.
They're pushing the table out of the way. So it's like they legit could be setting up for family game night.
And they are. They are
They
setting up for
sure
family
are.
game night. They bring this family over to the couch and they sit opposite them and they say, "We're gonna start with a guessing game. What is this?" And he holds up a golf ball that he pulls out of his pocket. Well, George says it's a golf ball. He says, "Well, the next question is, why is it in my pocket?" He's like, "Because I don't know." And he says, "It's because I didn't hit the golf ball.
Oh,
I hit something else with the golf club." And then what we have is they're playing hot and cold. He sends Anna out.
where's Ralphie?
Where's Ralphie? And this is where she's out in the backyard near the driveway where the car is. He's like, getting warmer, colder, very cold. Oh, warm, warm, warm. And she opened. Oh, right when she gets to, "You're hot, you're on fire." She's right by the car.
Yeah.
Paul turns over his shoulder, so we just see the back of his head. He turns over his shoulder, looks straight down the barrel of the camera, and winks.
Yep.
This
At
mofo
you.
winks at you.
At me, at you, at all of us.
And she opens the driver's side door, and Rolfie just tumbles out.
So a friend of mine was asking me, like, what film are you watching this week? And I was trying to describe Funny Games, you know, to somebody who doesn't watch like a super ton of horror films, but, you know, and I was like, have you ever heard of the, you know, the trope, kick the dog trope? And he was like, no, not really. I was like, okay, so, you know, in a Western, bad guys are bad because they kick the dog when they come into town. They're the ones who are like, you know, they're like the ones that, like, you know, Dudley is a bad guy in the Harry Potter series because he's the one who taps his finger on the glass and just, you know, this is so this idea of the like, kick the dog, oh, bad, you're a bad person, symbolize, right? It's like the first, it's like we're in the black hat, right? But we get a wink because not only do they kick the dog, they're going to kill the dog. They don't care. It's like they have no sentimentality over like, oh, did you have a puppy when you were little? Yeah, I bet you did. That's why we killed this dog.
Yeah.
Because we know, we being the author, director, being like, yeah, we're gonna line up a series of dominoes of like, what is sentimental to you? Home, family, this child, this with literally the biggest eyes you've ever seen, a dog, a friend. Who would hurt a dog?
You know what my hatred for this brilliant film comes from is the same as my hatred for April Fool's Day.
Oh
In
yeah,
that, like, I don't like, why are you doing this to me?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. This is not
I
fun.
don't need to know that these people are bad. I don't need you to see them kill the dog. I don't need you to see. I honestly, like, you brought up The Strangers, and I really, on watching The Strangers with for the show, Strangers is a movie that, now that I've kind of become used to horror films, I really enjoyed.
It's
It's
great.
scary, and I really liked it. I Watching this movie, this is different than my dislike for Hereditary. Hereditary I didn't like because of taste.
Mhm.
I didn't like how much he was forcing it, but I also knew he's forcing the tragedy in Hereditary in a way that I think I appreciated what he was doing. It just was not for me, and it was hard to watch. This is a movie where I really hate the filmmaker as he's doing the film, because
Yeah,
I think, like, why? What is like, violence is bad? Is that your thesis here? If we're talking about this as thesis horror, violence is bad. Violence in film is bad. Really, dude? Like, that's where we're
it's
at in
not bad.
1997?
I don't think it's bad. It's why do you watch these things? I think this
Yeah,
is a perfect film for this podcast because it's so much about horror. The reason why a lot of people say they don't like horror movies is because they're gratuitous.
yeah,
It is a gratuitous amount of violence, usually, but usually a gratuitous amount of nudity, sex.
sure.
Gratuitous.
Yeah,
This is not. It's like I feel in a movie like a typical horror film, you would have
uh,
had you would have seen that dog go down, and it would
yeah.
have been a bloody affair.
I
This you
agree.
don't get that, right? This
I
is
agree,
not
but
about that.
I think it's really gratuitous in its emotional manipulation and its implication of me, which I think I find, maybe, to be fair to this film, it's 26 years old, or what? How far
Sure.
removed from it? 1997? Yeah,
Yeah,
26
this is
years.
late 90s. Different
So
world.
yeah, different world, different
They
times.
didn't have
So
did they have YouTube? Could you look
no,
up,
no,
like
no,
you had to
no.
rent Faces of Death if you wanted to
Yes, of
see
course.
something truly gratuitous?
So to be fair to this film, it is of a time pre-internet and sort of
Yep.
like like just bombardment of things, and we were in the 90s very much having the conversation as to whether or not violent video games, like, one
Yeah.
year later we're going to talk about KMFDM and Marilyn Manson and violent video
Yeah.
games after Columbine happens.
Yeah.
And so to be fair to Michael Haneke, I'm not saying he's a bad guy or he made a shitty film or whatever. This is really not an aesthetic
You're just mad
analysis.
at him for
I'm
making a
I'm
good film that pushed your buttons.
I'm mad at him for the reasons he's pushing buttons. I find it kind of overly simplistic, and I was a little bit like, okay, yeah, cool, yeah, cool, I get it. Like, I think that's what it is. It feels real basic. This movie's premise is super, super basic to me, and I
Yeah.
had a hard time getting over it because it's so aggressive. A really basic film that's cute and light is a little bit easier to not be irritated with. You know what I mean? Like a rom-com or some shit like that that hits all the familiar buttons is basic,
Yeah.
but it's
I would say
enjoyable to
simple,
watch.
not basic.
Yeah.
Its premise is simple. It's very direct. It's very simple. It's violence happens.
Yeah.
And you're gonna watch, you have paid your money to to voluntarily
Yeah.
watch horrible things happen to good people.
Yeah.
What
And
the
I
fuck is
think,
wrong with you?
yeah, which
Is
is
the
where
question
I'm
he's
like,
asking.
this is the guy taping a banana to the wall and being like, it's art. And I think that that's where I went wrong with this movie. It was like, I think this is a real hack premise, is basically where I was with this movie. Listen, there's a lot to talk about with how good and how well made this film is, because a guy who tapes a banana to a wall and calls it art is also a person. You don't get to that stage without being a good artist. So it's not to say that just rando off the street could do that and call it art. I think you have to be really well trained to suddenly go Dada on this shit. And
Yeah.
I just thought his concept of Dada feels a little dated. It's a little bit like trying to be impressed with Marcel Duchamp outside of just historical context. And
You're
so
like, this is
outside,
monumental in the 90s.
that's where I was with this. That's the credit I'm going to give it, is that this was monumental for 1997. But I was like, I get your joke, and I know what I'm going to watch. And every scene of this is like, as far as the story beats and the emotional beats, I was like, okay, let's get to the next really beautiful shot or really clever, film device, which there are a fuck ton of in this. I do love this though, when he turns and winks at the camera, and then the next thing you know, that dog falls out. Like I like a good breaking of the fourth wall.
Yeah. He's
Um,
like, you want violence? Here you go.
Here you go. Um, so they, we're back inside. We're going to get into the breaking down of what makes a film, right? This is a year after Scream, right? Not that we hadn't already had films that broke down what horror tropes are,
Yeah.
but we're going to break down some film tropes because George is like, why are you doing this? And Paul turns to Peter and he's like, hey, Tubby, why are we doing this? And Peter starts to sob and talk about his parents divorcing. And Paul's like, he came from a depraved family of addicts.
Mhm.
He fucks his own mother. That's how
I
fucked
know.
up this
Yeah.
shit is. And then Peter just comes out of crying and is giggling. And Paul's like, no, that's real. Like we both come from wealthy families living here in the mountains. And I
Yeah.
don't know, ennui, you know how us kids are,
Yeah.
which I don't even know if that's
What else?
true.
What else do we have to do? So you get like, Bogosian suburbia kind of vibes out of this, but a lot of it, like this is the act where you really definitely get into the Leopold and Loeb rope narrative, which is
Mm-hmm.
bored, rich, white dudes who have read too much Ayn Rand and too much Nietzsche and think that they are some sort of like, Ubermensch, and they are out to just have a joyride on all the sheeple that they see every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is where I think this movie actually kind of comes, if we go death of the author and say like this movie in 2023 feels really frightening on a new level, because what we see is the rise of kind of Reddit white nationalism, like
Yeah,
Elon Musk loving white nationalists. They don't
sure.
realize that's where they are. They have a disdain for the rest of the world.
Yeah,
And
they're like the people that are like, I can't be racist. I've never been racist to another person in my life, but then again, I also live in a gated community in which I don't have to see or handle or deal or
Oh,
like,
I'm not talking about those are the liberals. Those are the liberal racists. I'm talking about the Reddit, like I'm talking about the
oh.
reply guys, right?
Okay.
I believe in reason and logic. I believe that logic
Yes.
should rule above all. I don't believe in like woke culture and cancel culture is ruining everything. Like look at the way they've destroyed Dave Chappelle's career. Look at all of this sort of stuff. I obviously like the real racists are people like Joe Biden or what have you. Like these are the people who have overthought things so much because they want to watch the world burn. Their favorite character is the Joker. Like
Yeah.
these types of people, and that's who these men represent, are the blue check marks on Twitter to me.
Gotcha.
That's who I mean is
The
those,
red pill matrix, like, come
right?
on, man,
Absolutely.
take off your shackles and see the government for the Jew child abusers that they are.
They've what they have found is nihilism, but they've wrapped it up in, to use this visual metaphor again, they've taken the bitter pill of nihilism and they wrapped it up in the peanut butter of reason, and they
Yeah.
think that they have found libertarianism makes total sense. I'm like, bitch, you're talking about anarchy, you idiot.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got this kind of this whole bit about what their character motivations are. Then we get into the bet, and Paul wants to
Yes.
make a bet. Hey, it's almost 9 o'clock at night. I would say in 12, let's say 9 a.m. tomorrow. I think the betting line is that you will be dead by then. So what do y'all think? What do you want to bet? Do you want to bet that you'll be dead or alive by 9 o'clock?
This is
Motherfucker.
so rough. And this is where I think as a film, it's like they give no answer. Like they're so stunned.
Yeah.
Like this family is still like literally like you see the legit. We're going to watch like every stop along the stages of grief in this film, and yet, oh God, what was the movie that came out? The Hunt, in which I think we watched it for Patreon, in which a young woman has been like, it's
Ready
like
or Not.
Ready or Not. That was it. In which a character goes, oh shit, I'm being fucking hunted. Okay. Green Room is another case. And they're like, oh shit, we're being hunted. We're being slaughtered. You know what? The only way to win is to play the fucking game and play it to the best of your ability, and you just might come out on top.
Mm-hmm.
But you can tell from the look when they're like this family ain't going to make it.
No.
And legit, at some point, I think it's around here, Paul turns to the audience and says, "What do you think? Hey, audience, do you want to make a bet?
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think they'll make it out?" Implying probably not, because I don't think they will.
Yeah.
Because it's like two crisp, young, full, like young, attractive, just nice young boys, nice young men, versus like George has got like one leg up on the couch. Like she has just had to strip, I think, or about ready to strip. Like she's been degraded. The child is bit like it is. They're already in their minds. They're already lost. And so the idea of bouncing back and actually like, I don't know, I'd be like, okay, Buck, how are you going to get out of this?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to go back to your earlier thing about this being sort of like an airtight situation, so many horror movies, you can be like, oh, why did you just run in there? Like any logical person would not have run back into the chainsaw family
the haunted house. The chainsaw house.
And in this movie, I was thinking about how I would have gotten out of that opening scene, but I wouldn't have. There's no way. There's no way around it, because they were going to hold you hostage no matter what. When he hits George with the golf club in the knee, it didn't matter that he slapped him. He could have said, "Hey boys, can we walk outside? Let's just go have a chat. Let's step outside for a second." They would have taken a hit. They were going to manipulate the argument to escalate to that point. And this is a movie where you don't actually know what to say, because if you play the game is you're tied up, you're fucked, you're gonna die. There are really no weapons here.
Yeah. It's also, I found during this sort of portion of the film, I found myself thinking of a lot of like Holocaust narratives, a lot of like we are clearly, we the Nazis, we have, taken you over, and we need you to build some shit, but don't talk back. Like how do you find that humanity within yourself to like just function?
Yeah.
When you're surrounded by sociopaths.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this whole sequence where they have Anna undress in front of them because they're in an argument about like, well, how old do you think she is? Like, this is so creepy and gross. And it's interesting because and I guess throughout this film, you don't really ever see the violence. Like, you don't ever see death.
One violent moment, and that moment is rewound and retaked.
You're right. There's only one violent moment, and it's when Peter gets shotgun blasted to the chest, and then he takes that away from you.
Takes it back.
And so even in this scene where, which, I appreciated not having to like sit there and watch them like
just paint each other with blood and
and I also appreciate in the scene where they have her take her clothes off so they can analyze. It's actually, I say I appreciate it. It's almost worse not seeing it. When you talked about in an in a much cheesier horror film, we're gonna watch the blood and the goo and the ooze.
You would watch the full strip.
And part of being able to see that, there's a little bit of closure, there's a little bit of understanding of what happened to somebody. And then here you don't get to see it, and it's almost worse. It's like being told about something horrible, and the way you have to cringe through that. They so
you just watch her face. And it's a full 2 minutes of watching a woman taking her clothes off in front of violent oppressors, in which it's just a headshot.
It's only ever on her face, even if she's bending down and doing whatever. So at the end of this moment, they're like, yep, see, she has no fat on her body. She looks great for 35 years old, looking awesome. So Georgie then breaks free.
Yeah.
And he runs upstairs and sneaks out the upstairs window.
And I love this because there's a moment where it's like he goes to the front door and the door's locked. They've locked them in. He runs upstairs. And of course, everybody goes, don't go upstairs, classic. But the next shot is literally that kid fucking climbing out the window and like shimmying his way down. You're like, oh, see, it's like he knows what the audience wants the characters to do. And so he does it. He's like, all right, fine. This is what you want. This is what they're doing.
And he does mostly smart things, but obviously, like being a kid, you kind of forgive the children for making choices you wouldn't have made, because I would have hauled my ass to town, not the neighbor's house.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Like I would have literally kept running until I encountered another living person with a telephone.
yeah. So,
But he sneaks over. He's like, okay, can't climb over the gate because he's too short.
mhm,
And then he's like, okay, I'll wade through the like shallows of the lake and go over to our neighbor's house. Oof, stranger danger. Go to the neighbor's house. And unfortunately, I think Paul is after him. So he knows he's being pursued, knows he's in the house. And he realized that I love that this is such like it's almost like an homage / fuck you to Stanley Kubrick,
mhm.
in that the kid realizes that the bottom half of his trousers and shoes are wet from going through the lake, and he's left wet
Yeah,
footprints through the kitchen. And this kid goes, oh shit, he can track me. So he takes off his pants and takes off his shoes, and then is now like running through the house, which is exactly what Danny does
oh yeah,
to get away from Jack Torrance at the end of The Shining. They're like, oh shit, I'm leaving a trail.
mhm,
Okay, how can I use that? And has to backtrack or play a trick or play a game and then play hide.
yeah,
And that's when, so it's worked for other horror movie protagonists. Why won't it work for this kid?
yeah. So he, in hiding upstairs in one of the rooms, because he knows Paul's in the house, he looks out in the hallway and he sees to the left on the floor of the hallway is a antique shotgun.
Yeah.
And to the right down the hall is the hallway bathroom, and all he sees are the legs on the floor of his friend Sissy and a pool of blood.
Yeah.
And obviously, like,
Just
traumatizing, just the feet.
Just the feet.
And Paul is like calling out, like, Georgie, and he's like, hey, do you want to hear some music? I'll put on some music. And then he throws on some more fucking,
It's the same anarchy noise rock.
Naked City, if you would like to do a quick Spotify search for Naked City. Paul eventually corners him, and the boy has the shotgun. And this is the classic thing where we saw this, I think, in Dust Devil at one point in time, of like, safety's on. You actually have to cock the gun, and they're walking towards the boy.
Like the villain having to explain to the good but slightly terrified and dumb protagonist how to kill the villain, which they can't seem to do.
No,
but and he does, and for this kid's for this kid, he pulls the trigger.
Click.
But there's no bullets.
Nope. So back at the house with Peter watching over Anna and George, and she says, why don't you just kill us? And he says that would deprive us of entertainment value. Sure. So when Peter steps out, Peter's like, oh, you know what? I was supposed to get some eggs, which is part of the game. He goes into the kitchen, leaving them alone.
Yeah.
And when he comes back, he catches George trying to gnaw the tape that's binding Anna's hands and feet. And then as he's roughing them up, Paul comes back into the house, and he's got little Georgie with him.
Yeah. And he's like, I have another game. Let's play Kitten in a Bag.
That was earlier. That was that was during the strip scene. They play Kitten in the Bag.
Oh, they use yes.
Kitten in the Bag
use the son is leverage to get her to strip.
Yes. So he takes the boy and puts a bag over his head, and
it's just so iconic, that image of like, it's so innocent and yet so horrible. Like when it's like the golf ball. Yeah. Like, which he's going to use again. It's like, why is this golf ball in my pocket?
Yeah.
Because I'm about to murder you. That's why.
Yep.
Is that not a funny joke?
No. Well, and the thing I love about Kitten...
Is that not Garfield without Garfield?
Oh, God. The thing I love about Kitten in a Bag is, one, the name is sinister because it implies you're drowning kittens.
You could drown a kitten.
That's one. Yeah. Two, the visual of Kitten in a Bag is this psychopath holding your child with a bag over his head. So the bag is already horrifying when you put a bag over someone's head. That's you're about to get executed sort of thing.
Yes.
And then but on the flip side of it, it's all done in this like, well, of course, like, we want you to do this kind of adult thing of stripping down, and of course you're not embarrassed in front of your not for children. Yeah, so we're
actually doing the right thing by intimidating you using your child. We're covering his eyes for you so you can degrade yourself in front of us for our pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. This is
This is
also
Eeny Miny Mo. This is Austrian Eeny Meeny Miny Mo is what they're going to play right now.
And so they're doing the eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and Peter says, or Paul says, hey, well, you do the eeny, meeny, miny, mo to see who's next. So we know we're going to kill somebody. We're going to kill one of these people. I'm going to go make a sandwich. And he goes into the kitchen. So the camera follows him into the kitchen and just watches this guy dig through the thing, get some cold cuts, start buttering up some bread. And he calls out, hey, can I get anyone anything? It's pure psychopath.
And then shotgun blast.
How? He does not twitch, does not move, just makes his sandwich. And coming back in, meanwhile, the television this whole time is just playing NASCAR.
Yeah.
Like just NASCAR is on television right
now. Or Grand Prix.
Yeah.
As we're in Europe.
But they're racing stock cars.
Oh, really? Oh,
so they're not racing they're not racing Formula One. I assume Europe runs stock cars as well. But they're running, it's a stock car race. It's not even Formula One, which is the much higher art form of that sport. And
it's just a shot of the television dripping with blood.
Yep.
With a car, with just car going zoom, 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 zoom. Which, come on, why do people go to car races?
Sport.
Not because you fucking love Dale Earnhardt. I mean, although you love, everybody loves Dale Earnhardt.
R.I.P.
Go to watch because there's a potential of a crash.
It's a sidebar of every sport is that like we don't want to see people get injured, but we kind of want to see people get injured. Yeah.
But it's the unexpected. Anything could happen. That's why we pay our money for sport, for entertainment. It's the thing that you might see something that you've never seen before. And oftentimes we crave violence or somebody's life is on the line so that you can pay your $25 to go have a day in which you watch literally cars drive in a circle.
Yeah.
Add in for 500 times.
Yeah.
As fast as they can and try to beat each other because somebody is going to fuck up. And that's when the exciting shit happens.
I sort of disagree as a sports fan. I don't agree, though. I think some people who don't follow sports will be like, get interested when a major wreck happens, right? Like a video goes around of a car crash. But like, I just think it's an overly simplified way that Michael Haneke sees that, if that's indeed why he puts NASCAR on. I think he does it because it's the most banal sport to watch. Like banal. That's a harsh word. Respect to NASCAR fans, but it's like it's repetitive, right? There's no like the plot of NASCAR is so the premise is so simple. The sounds are repetitive. It is a droning sound. Yep. So in a way, it feels so stupid to have on the TV while the utmost of violence is happening. Because I think car racing is like golf. It's very exciting for the people who are into the sport. I'm personally not super into either. But when I have watched golf or when I have watched NASCAR or Formula One, there is some excitement to it, but a lot of it is that like you're almost in a vegetative state for a little bit. Like it's a soothing sport. It's not uptight like hockey or soccer where like every second some shit's happening and at any moment something exciting could happen in the sport. I do think like the accidents and the violence of the game are part of it, but against what this film is kind of saying, the people who participate in sports understand the risk of the sport, and the people who watch the sport understand that that's what's happening. There's something about like implicating me for spending money to watch something could go wrong. And I'm like, bitch, you made this movie. Like you didn't have to make this movie, but you did. So inherently you made a movie that I think makes these two psychopaths super entertaining. I think it makes them really not likable because they're doing horrible things, but it gives them the personality of really common 20-something charming boys. And I don't know that it just plays in a way that you're like, every step, like in a Brecht, I'm like fascinated with what's happening in this film. I'm fascinated with how it's shot, how it's written, how it's told. And I didn't really feel much after the first act of this film. After a while, I'm just like, okay, here's your very like slickly done thesis.
Yeah.
And here is, I think, the most compelling shot of this film. It is, uh, well, I'll just say it's a wide shot of the whole living room, and we can only see George's legs on the floor behind the couch because he's got this injured leg, and so we can't see his whole body. We see over by the TV on the right, in front of the television, is the dead body of Georgie, the son. Blo-
Headless.
Blood splattered across the wall where his head would have been as he was running away,
Yeah.
and blood on the television. And then sitting in almost center is Anna, taped up, hands behind her back, ankles bound, on the couch, not looking at her son. I didn't even time this, but this is a couple of minutes of just her. I thought my video had frozen of just this shot
Yeah.
until
Just eyes
finally
open, mouth open.
she hops over to the TV, turns it off, and she doesn't look at her son until
Yeah.
she hops away to go cut herself free and then bring
Well,
George in.
she cuts herself free. She goes over to her husband,
Uh-huh.
and he wails, which
Yeah.
again is like, we are so used to the wailing woman, over the no, it's gonna be the fucking father that
Mm-hmm.
wails in
Mm-hmm.
this. And she's comforting. She's like, just breathe, just breathe. She's like helping him through a panic attack,
Yeah.
until finally that subsides. And this is all one shot. This is
Yeah.
like, so that it starts with that silence, but it ends with the father wailing. They kind of, talk. They're like, okay. And then it's more than this stunned, numb.
Yeah.
And then she says, because Paul and Peter have left.
We heard their voices right
But we
during
never see them.
this.
And
We
again,
never
it's
see them.
things happen. We hear things, but sometimes what we see and what we hear do not always match up.
No. And what we hear them saying, it's Paul berating Peter for,
Yeah.
you got too trigger happy. Like, you played the counting game wrong. You can't kill the child
Yeah.
first.
Because
That's
now
not
they'll
how,
be useless for the rest of the
now
night.
they're useless because that was our one bit of leverage on them.
Yeah.
And like, and Peter's like, well, he tried to run. He's like, let's just go.
Yeah.
And they're like, bye, we're gone.
But it happens so fast.
Yeah.
And this is all kind of like after the sandwich moment, but it happens so fast. And something is going on. You don't know who's dead yet.
Yep.
But you know that they're gone. And so then you're just left with a couple, like, again, you don't see the violence. You see the grief.
Yeah.
You see the aftermath.
Yeah.
And then finally this long, it's like a 10-minute shot, 12-minute shot at least,
Yeah.
ends with the three of them trying to hobble as a three-legged animal into the other room. Because she's like, maybe if you lean on me, and it's clearly not going to work.
No. And they realize that the phone, the cordless phone is sort of working again, like the lights
Yeah.
are back on. They get a dial tone, but it, like, the buttons aren't working yet. So she gets a hairdryer. He just sits at home and is running a hairdryer over this thing, and he basically is like, she says, like, I'm gonna run and get help. And he's like, yeah, go without me, just go now.
Yeah. Like, he keeps begging her. He's like, you got to go. Listen. And also, and they're trying to do the things that a smart audience member, they're like, she puts on running shoes, she changes, like, it's all the things of like, like,
Yeah.
you're right there, like, don't go barefoot, classic, you're gonna step on glass, like, that's how it always, or you're wearing stupid shoes,
Yeah.
all the stupid horror tropes, they sidestep them all.
Yeah.
The
It's
other
a great
moment
point. Yeah.
the other moment that I really love in this sequence is right before she's about ready to crawl up the kitchen window. He turns to her and says, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry I couldn't save our child or protect you.
Yeah.
And this is the moment where because she's been so, like, she hasn't cried yet.
Yeah.
She's thrown up, like, she has to, like, close the door. She can't look into the other room, and that makes her throw up. But when he says, I'm sorry, that's when she cries.
Yeah.
And she says, I love you. And then leaves.
Yeah. So she gets out of the house. I think this is the only point where I was thinking, okay, a real adult out on the town. she played her hand wrong, because what she does is she hide one. I
She's
think it's
once she's run down the middle of the fucking road.
one she is, but okay. So first thing we see is after she kind of gets out onto the into the road, we see a car coming, and I'm like, you hide, fucking hide. And she does. And she sees the car. As the car passes, she realizes, oh, that's a van. Like that's a working van. Like there's print on the side. And so that's when she starts to run to flag it down,
Like,
but
oh, no,
she's too
hang on.
late. Yeah, because she's like, that's clearly not them.
Yeah.
They're not going to be in that van. A good calculated guess. My thought was, don't be hitchhiking right now.
Right? Don't
Because
trust nobody.
listen, even if these two boys don't pick you up, unsavory characters at 4 a.m. driving around fucking Salzburg or whatever. Yeah.
Or they have a knife to some other nice normal person.
Yeah.
And they're in the back seat.
Yeah. There's no reason why you can't sneak through. I would have been sneak through the woods until I can.
Oh, I'd be like unseen.
Get to I may even like hide in a grotto until morning and to get help. But I get it. Like I also
you can't go too long because there's a 9 a.m. deadline.
That's true. That is true. Well, you also sort of know, I think I would have been in war mode. I think I would have been like, husband's dead. I can't save him.
Oh, collateral damage. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of collateral damage to that, or risk I have to take. I have to get cops to show up at my house, and by them showing up, they're going to kill him probably anyway, but my best chance is not waiting till, you're right, not until 9, but surely somebody's open at like 7, right? There's got to be a 7-Eleven.
There's a milkman.
Right?
There's a milkman or a baker around here in this Austrian village somewhere.
yeah, that's totally
has a fucking working phone.
Well, she picks the second car to come along, and back at the house, George has gone in and put a blanket over his son. Yeah. And then he hears clunk,
he also gets a dial tone. He tries to call his brother or something, is like, call the police. Doesn't work. No batteries. The whole shebang. It's just, and this is where I'm like, I think I caught some of your annoyance with this film, where I'm just like, now you're just being cruel. You, Michael Haneke, you're just being cruel because you're giving us false hope. But isn't that what a horror film is?
Well, that's
horror film is nothing but a succession of false hope. Maybe, there's a phone.
Yeah.
Oh, the phone is in the water. But maybe we can be smart. We're smart people. Smart people are usually rewarded in films. We'll dry it out with a hairdryer. We'll put that iPhone in some fucking rice and see if that helps. Which it never does, but it's something you do because you don't want to feel helpless.
Yeah.
So you do these silly things, and the phone call doesn't go through.
No.
And he's interrupted.
Well, he's interrupted by we hears the clunk, 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 and he looks down, and the golf ball is just rolling out through the foyer, and he's like, motherfucker. And here they come with his wife.
Yep.
All right. So now they're gonna have it's getting morning time, right? It's dawn. Near dawn.
Let's wrap it up. We're tired.
Yeah.
Let's wrap
Peter
it up.
and Paul have them on the couch, and they're having a conversation, again, mostly off camera, while we're looking at the faces of this couple. And they're talking about what to do next. And, Paul's like, oh, listen, I got this boat. Like, sailing's fun. We should go sailing. They also have the shotgun still with them. And they have the knife that she left out on the counter after she cut herself free. And the way that it's not that there's not a bunch of knives in the kitchen and they know that, but the fact that she left one out, they have to point it out to her, like, you did this. You're the one who got us this knife.
You gave us a knife.
Yeah. So they say
practically your fault for all of this.
They're gonna play the game The Loving Wife, which is
who gets killed.
You get to decide who gets killed and with what. They also, there's a moment where Peter is off camera. Oh, I'm sorry. No. Peter, they're sitting on the couch, and Peter's like, I'm so like hungry and bored, and can we just kill them? And Paul says, no, we haven't reached feature-length film yet.
I
And he
know, right?
looks right at the camera. He's like, this isn't enough for you, right? Like, is this enough for you? Have you had
Yeah.
enough? Whew. So there's also a moment too where this is a great line. Such a good line. He tells Anna, you should pray. Pick a prayer. This is how you'll
Oh
win
my
the game.
God. Oh, this
And she's
scene
like, I
is
don't know any
brutal.
prayers. Well, neither does Peter really. He's like, Peter, tell her a prayer to say. And Peter's like, well, here's
But
this
it's the way
one.
they're like, you don't know any. Like what kind of animal are you that you do what like taking it, like literally family, God, like all of it is up for grabs.
Yeah.
All of it, none of it exists in a void.
But the setup of the rules of this game, they're so vicious. And I mean that in the best way. Because Anna says in starting this game, she says, what do I do next? And Paul says, easy. Say a prayer. If you do it correctly, God will help you. Which
Yeah.
is the most just like heart drop out of your chest moment.
Yeah.
Like brutal.
Well,
Brutal.
so what I was clued in on the prayer that she's given,
Uh-huh.
which is, Lord, make me meek so that I will meet you in heaven.
Yeah.
Because that's what their game depends upon. This, I think, is like a key that unfortunately is way too fucking late to unlock any of these doors. But that is the key. They are depending upon their victims to be meek.
Yep.
Because isn't that what we're taught? Turn the other cheek. Don't start fights. Don't escalate. Don't start. Like be the person who's the better person. But their games are depending upon that. So if at any time over the last hour and a half, they could have fucking bum rushed these two and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah.
Yes, he's gotten hit in the leg, but you know what? His arms still work.
Yeah.
His mouth still work. Like you could bite him. Like there's so many ways, but that depends upon, like when I said earlier, when this, like, when he turns to the camera and says, do you want to take a bet? Who do you think is going to win? It's like walking, again, I hate these sports metaphors, but going up and seeing a team that's in like crisp, clean uniforms and a team that is like ragtag, you're like, your initial glance is, well, that team looks a little better prepared.
Yeah. Sometimes the ragtag team
case
has the
but
energy and the will. Yeah.
But the ragtag team has to be hungry for it.
Yeah.
And this couple stays meek.
Yeah.
They never get hungry. They never truly fight for their right to exist, to live, to make it out of this movie alive. And that, I think, is the, you talk about like the director's thesis. Like, I think that's the thing of like, why are we acting so meek in our lives, but then craving violence in entertainment?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, it gets to the heart of what it even means to write something. Like, there's kind of a movement for, do we need conflict in storytelling?
Yeah.
And it depends on how you define conflict, right? If you define conflict as people who have different interests, then absolutely you need conflict.
Yeah.
Like you and I have conflict every time we talk, not because we fight or argue, but it's because like, well, this is a thing I like. Oh, I kind of agree, but I kind of like this better. What do you want for lunch is a conflict. It depends on what you
I like
mean
Italian, you like Mexican.
Yeah.
And we settle for Chinese because we compromise on a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But like,
or I kill you and I eat your body.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah.
However that
when
movie
does
ends.
conflict escalate?
Yeah.
To the point where you're talking about creating violence, not just physical violence or the threat of physical violence, but emotional violence, right? The way Paul keeps calling Peter Tubby and he doesn't like it. That's a form of violence to do to somebody, to create, to make them feel horrible about themselves. Well, she does finally show some initiative, because at the end of this prayer, she's got her hands, she's kneeling, she's praying, and she sees that shotgun. She reaches down, grabs it before Paul can stop her, and she just blasts Peter in the fucking chest.
Yeah. So all that white, blam,
blam, blood on the back
and it's
wall.
like Quentin Tarantino, like he flies back against the wall, and it's so gratifying. So gratifying, which again is like, what is wrong with us that we watch these things and we're like, yes, shoot that man. That's not something I normally say in my everyday life. Yes, shoot
No.
that man. And yet in this moment, you're like, oh, fucking thank God. And Paul says, where's the remote?
And he's flustered. He's like, where's that fucking remote? Like, he's tearing
Yeah.
up. It's the first moment in this whole film he looks mad.
Yeah. Or something is not going according to the game, the plot.
Yeah. This is the first. This is such a brilliant device to use at this moment in this movie for what Haneke is doing, for putting the audience in this film and being a bitch to them. He is.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah, he's
good.
being a dick.
He's
being a
being
real
an
dick.
absolute dick. This movie is a filmmaker being a dick to you because he doesn't like that you like horror movies, and so he made a horrible horror movie for you to watch and be upset. I don't know. Anyways, but it is a brilliant moment for what he's making. And this scene though does take me out of the plot in the sense that, why, as you just said, I think you put a finger on hungry to survive. She makes the choice to kill a man. She does not make the choice to live, because the choice to live here is shoot Peter, shoot Paul,
get him out.
Doesn't do it.
Like she's so shocked by her own capacity for violence.
Yeah.
That in that moment, she loses her eye on the ball, and she, like, I think he punches her, and she's kind of out.
He gets it out of her hand before she can do anything. And but there's not a fight.
He hits the rewind button.
Yeah, and
it's not a fight. It's really the violence is so quick. It's like it's like a punch and then down. It's the same thing with the golf club in the kneecap. Yeah. Like we don't even see it really. Like we just see a swing of a club, but we know exactly what's happening because that's what film is. It's the power of suggestion. You don't have to watch every fucking thing. Yeah. That's what makes kind of, schlocky B movies, is we're like, yeah, we got to see the monster and, unstrip the clothes off of, the heroine kind of shit. This is, we know what's happening. We don't need to watch it. And that's somehow worse.
Yeah.
I also thought it was funny coming off of watching Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid, in which we have another sort of like God universal remote.
Yeah, sure.
Moment. I was like, what? Weird. One went forward, one went back. I don't know, just a very odd little synchronicity of this podcast.
Next week on the podcast, we'll be covering Adam Sandler's Click.
That's what I thought. But that's the next logical move.
So they rewind. He's not dead. She's back at the prayer. She reaches for the gun again. This time, Paul is quick enough to stop her.
And he just takes it out of her hands.
And he executes George.
Yeah.
Then we
don't see that either.
Yeah, we just hear the gunshot, and we're outside, and they are carrying her onto the sailboat. She's tied up. She's got her mouth taped, her hands and legs taped up.
They've got yellow rain slickers on. Oh, an important piece of plot that we missed in the beginning, kind of when we're still playing the intimidation game, is some friends of theirs arrive by boat and say, you absolutely must come over to our house for dinner or something or whatever. And Paul is there while I think Anna is talking to her friends, and she's, trying to do her best to pretend like nothing is wrong, like everyone else in this film, being nice and meek. And Paul says, like their rich friend, who's another like strong woman that doesn't look like she suffers fool gladly. And, she's like, oh, you have a beautiful boat. And she's like, I know, just very like matter of fact.
Yep.
And she's like, she says, oh, we're just around the cove. And Paul interrupts her conversation, says, oh, the house with the ivy. And she says, yes, that one. And he looks at Anna as in like, your friends are next. I know exactly. So like, don't think about them as an escape route, because I know where they live too.
Yeah. Yep.
And sure enough, we're in the boat, and you even though it's not in, we're going to get to that in a minute.
We're going to get to that. We're not there yet, but
anyway,
they
that
get
scene
out
was missed in the tightly wound plot.
Yeah, I was just going to throw it in at the end, but yeah, you're right. It ties into what Fred did with them earlier. Which I sort of, because this movie is so old, I already know what this movie is about. So from the beginning, when you see Fred introduce Paul to our protagonist, you know that Fred is under whatever violent spell. So they get out on the sailboat, and it is this mundane conversation about a sci-fi movie that we did not see,
No,
about alternate realities and universes, and they're arguing over how
which they
the
like,
story
yeah,
was.
they like split open. Like it's like his body is in space, but his soul is in
Yeah, and
another dimension or something.
it's that they're arguing about structure of filmmaking is what they're
Yeah,
arguing about.
yeah.
And God, then they're
Well, no. I would say what they're arguing over is plot, or excuse me, fiction imitating
yes,
life, or life imitating fiction. They're
right,
like, well,
because
that's just dumb because you can't actually do that in real life. He's like, and Peter's like, point, well, you can do anything you want in fiction.
yeah,
It
and
doesn't have to be just like life.
yeah, and one of them says reality in film is just as real as reality in real life, basically. And but meanwhile, she finds Chekhov's knife and
Yes.
she starts cutting the ties on her hands, and they just sort of casually look down like, oh, look, she found that
Oh,
knife. They grab the knife, throw it overboard, continue their conversation.
yeah.
It's just past 8 o'clock. She's sitting on the boat with them as they're having the argument. Paul looks at his watch. He's like, well, it's just past 8. We didn't make it to 9, but ciao, Bella. And he pushes her overboard.
Yeah. He's like, he literally says, like, I'm hungry. Let's just speed this process up a
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. So, and then that's when
There
they
she
show.
goes. But she gets like like for our strong female protagonist, she gets like the most, like the biggest brush off.
The
Because
most
normally,
uneventful death for a
yeah,
final girl you'll ever
that's it.
see.
Normally, the final death of any horror movie is the most dramatic. It's the
Hmm.
big reveal. Nope. This one's just like, nope, we got to go. We got other people to murder. Tick tock, tick tock. Bye.
And then
No sentimentality.
they show up at Gerda's house asking for eggs for your friend Anna asked us to come over and borrow some eggs.
Yep.
And
She's like in her bathrobe and a little befuddled, like anybody would be.
she's like, come on in. And then Paul just smirks at the camera and it goes still shot, noise core music, and then white credits, like black ink,
Not fade to
white
black,
paint,
not fade to black, fade to white.
Shall we rate this movie?
Yes, let's.
On our Sasha scale, squeamish approachability scale for the horror averse, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being do not approach this film if you're horror averse, and 10 being like you're totally fine. Funny games, 1 out of 10 winks at the camera. Like, don't watch this movie first if you're thinking about getting into horror. Not the place to start. It's sad.
Or maybe it's exactly the place to start.
It's sad, it's tense, it's violent, there's kid death, there's dog death, there's like
Just like human depravity and degradation, like forced
physical and
bad.
psychological torture.
All of it.
And it's a movie that is not just doing these things, but it's doing them in a way that it's like you're an accessory to this.
Yeah.
It is. I was thinking that about horror as exploitation film, right? Like a slasher movie is an exploitation film, but this is exploitation at its least campy, right? Like this movie is the opposite of camp. There is nothing comfortable about this movie. There's nothing
fun.
No,
there's nothing enjoyable. There's nothing, and it even takes the joy out of a wink to, like, even a wink to the camera is like literally the worst thing you could possibly see in that moment.
I forgot to mention that when this movie went to credits, I just go, I wrote in my notes that I said out loud, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
It is a movie that will engender go fuck yourself all the way through. Again, I've been watching too much Succession. I need to not be saying go fuck yourself.
I think you should, Jeffrey.
What about you as a horror film, Cecil?
Where do you put this movie in the horror film canon? It is an anti-horror film. It's an anti-film.
Yeah.
It's nihilistic in its outlook, in its thought process, in the way it's shot. It's like, it is a horror film. Horrific things happen, and they happen, and they're beautifully done. But you feel icky afterwards in a way that you don't after, I don't know, Freddy's dead, or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think this movie did have its finger on the pulse of violence on film at a time period where that was a huge part. We're like, spoiler, it's not the films that are making people kill each other, or is it?
Yeah.
That debate.
Yeah.
which I guess we're still having to this day, as people are still enacting violence. Who the fuck knows? Anyway,
We
so
have, but
for all of
it's
that,
just evolved, right? Like it's just
it's
changing.
evolved.
Yeah.
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 But this idea, yeah. But there is something very simple about this movie, very clean. And I gotta say, I enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
enjoyed it again. So for that reason, I'm gonna give it like -7
For its
golf balls.
yeah, anti-film gets an anti-rating and
There you
-7.
go.
Yeah. Let's figure out what we will watch next. You have a scare die. I have a style die. We'll roll those up, see what film matches the two things. So, Cecil, if you roll a 1, our next film scare is Animal. 2, Alien. 3, Lady Killer. 4, Magic with a K. 5, Evil Science. Or 6, Wild Card, whatever scare we sort of want.
That's a 4.
We're going to do Magic with a
Man, these
K.
scores are hot.
Are hot. All right, let's see what I've got here. I've got a style die, and if I roll a 1, our magic movie has to be found footage. 2, an action fantasy. 3, a black and white film. 4, body horror. 5, New York, New York, something that takes place in New York City. Or 6, 75th percentile, like something that is 75% or higher on like a review.
Most people
site.
like.
Yeah. All right, here we go. I got a 1. Found footage, magique.
Oh, wow.
This is
okay.
interesting.
Okay. Wow. Throwing us a curveball here.
We've got a few things on here. I think one that stands out the most to me is Haksan, Witchcraft Through the Ages. This is a 1920s, very early film that is done with like documentary style about witchcraft. It looks
It's not a real
spooky
documentary.
No, but it's done documentary style.
Yes.
Yeah. Mockumentary. And I don't like mockumentary because it makes it sound like a comedy. So documentary style, but
Yes,
it is. But it's also done.
intentionally-
It's also done with. I haven't seen this movie, but I believe that it is done as documentary and also with some fiction acting. Like it's a series of scenes. It's a bunch of shorts kind of thing. Another movie we put Skinamarink on here. Is there magic in Skinamarink?
Sort of supernaturally. But
I
don't
guess
know if
so.
it's mad. I mean, like, listen, toilets disappear in that film for no
That's
reason
true.
whatsoever. So
I'm gonna say probably not magic because it's just supernatural or weird. Last Witch. This is a I've seen it referred to as a Blair Witch knockoff. Like it is
yes.
young filmmakers go into the woods to find about a legendary witch.
Yep. But this time in Spain.
Right. The last horror movie.
I'm kind of curious about this. I think I might have put this on here.
I believe so.
Serial killer uses horror video rental to lure his next victim in. It's a teen slasher. I don't know if there's any magic in here, but somehow this got on the list.
Yeah. I didn't really see magic in this on this one. We got some good ones on Letterboxd. So Peter Burt throws out, this looks really interesting. There is a Thai film called The Medium from 2021 that is done in documentary style.
Okay.
Sure, a horrifying story of a shaman's inheritance in the Isan region of Thailand, but the goddess that appears to have taken possession of a family member turns out not to be as benevolent as first appears.
Uh-oh.
Also, 75% on IMDb, so good for that.
Let's see. Rec 2, REC2.
Is that
now,
magic?
This is more zombie than magic, I think. Love the series though. Like the REC, the record series is great for found footage.
That was Squin. Squin also put in Host from 2020, which we haven't covered yet. That's a seance kind of magic-ish, yeah. Peter Burt also threw out the Blair Witch remake from 2016.
Well, the Blair Witch. Well, what's interesting about
it's not a remake. It's like it's in universe. Is it a prequel? Is that how it is?
Okay. No, it's a sequel, but it's not. It's about another group of filmmakers that kind of go out and like try to recreate the film of the Blair Witch Project. So in that way, the found footage does exist inside the world of the film, but the film itself is not a found footage film.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I say it counts.
Okay.
Because they literally find footage in there.
Brave Crab throws out one that I have wanted to watch and haven't seen yet. Paranormal Activity 3,
Yes.
because as Brave Crab says, it's when they introduce the witch coven element to the series.
Yes,
And
because it
this
was
is
always yeah, because it was always about like, oh, I've had this demon sitting on my shoulder ever since I was a little girl. And then in Paranormal Activity 3, you kind of find out why she has that demon.
gotcha. Yeah, listen, Brave Crab, I want to say this right now. I love you very much. You offer a lot of good things. I'm
Very
still
good suggestions.
I can't tell if you're if you should just get a you should just get a warning from the refs for suggesting Leprechaun 4 in space to us, or if you're full on 5 minute major. I'm not sure where you're at, but
Oh, I
Paranormal
think you're out of
Activity.
the penalty box.
Okay,
Out
you're
of the
out of the
penalty
penalty
box for
box.
Leprechaun
Great.
4. That was our bad. Because honestly, is space really is the future a period piece? I
Yeah.
think we fudged it on that
I'm a
one.
little like Paul from Funny Games. I'm just gonna make it sound like it's Brave Crab's fault, even though
Great.
it clearly was ours. And then finally, Diamond Dog says, "As above, so below," which is definitely found footage. I saw this as more. I haven't seen this movie, but I interpreted this movie
Zombies?
as being more zombie, less magic.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I mean, zombies are sometimes magical and sometimes,
Yeah, true,
rage,
true, true.
just like, rage virus.
Yeah. So
Okay. Oh man, this is tough.
I have
I
two on here
yeah,
or three on here that I'm really would be super excited to watch. Haxon, just
yeah.
because the film history sort of thing. Paranormal Activity 3, still
Mm-hmm.
really want to see this movie. It looks
Yep.
super fun. And The Medium, a Thai
I'm
film, got good
man,
reviews. It is found footage style and that it's documentary and seems magic-ish, looks really smart and sharp.
I feel so bad that we've gotten so close to watching Haxon before, and we've
Uh-huh.
always gone with the other thing.
Yeah. I
And
think
I
if
don't know if we're going to make that same choice again, but I want to point out this is the second time that we've gotten close to watching Haxon. And then we're
uh-huh.
like, no, we're going to watch another thing. The Medium does sound good. I love hey, listen,
We haven't done like a
I love a spooky medium.
yeah. We have done a lot of like 20th, 21st century movies. So maybe like it's nice to touch base with our history
This
in
is
film.
kind of like horror homework
I think so
101,
too.
you know?
And I hear it's actually very good to watch. Like it's not a boring homework assignment at all. So
Nice.
let's do Haxon.
Let's do it.
Hexen. I'm guessing it's heck. I don't know how to say it. All right. Well, we'll figure it
Hawkson.
out. Hexen. Hexen. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Cecil, for talking with me. And if you have thoughts on funny games or ideas for other movies that would have been good, found footage, magic-y sort of things, let us know on Instagram or on Twitter at Random Horror 9 and watch Haxon. I think I'm saying that right. With us this week, and come on back next Tuesday for a new episode. Have a restful night with no blowhard art house director breaking into your house to lecture you about horror movies or nothing. Boo.
Boo.